Hello all and welcome to Stingray Tom's Florida and Another Amazing 10. Today we'll be looking back 50 years to the opening of the Walt Disney World Resort in 1971. Officially opening on October 1st, it redefined the word resort and changed both what Florida was as a state as well as the perception of Florida around the world. Not surprisingly, while I'll be sharing 10 amazing facts at the beginning of Walt Disney World, I'll be sharing much more information as well. I'll take a quick look at aspects of the resort's construction, cover what was open when the first guests arrived, and what opened soon after. I've subtitled the video Snapshot 71 because it's an interesting look at Walt Disney World at one point in time. I'm cheating a bit, however. While I'm covering opening day, it's important to cover the additional attractions that came online soon after. So this Snapshot 71 covers October 1971 to December 1973. Enjoy! As I ever so briefly covered in this video, the story of Walt Disney World started well before 1971. Really, it was Walt Disney's flight over Central Florida that is famously considered the beginning of the resort. As Sam Genoway describes in his 2011 book, Walt and the Promise of Progress City, traveling by private plane on November 22, 1963, Walt and his team instructed the pilot to fly over Orlando. They followed the Sunshine State Parkway toward the intersection of Interstate 4, then under construction. When Walt saw the construction site, he proclaimed, "That's it. The freeway bisects here." The trip was the first time that Walt saw the entire Florida property in person. By the way, Genoway also noted the November 22, 1963 is much more famous for a completely different reason. When Walt Disney and his group landed in New Orleans later in the day, they learned that President John F. Kennedy had been assassinated in Dallas. While that Friday was when Disney picked the location for his Florida project, it was far from the first time he had visited Central Florida, which leads us to amazing history fact number 1. Walt was familiar with Central Florida long before 1963. The small town of Paisley in Lake County at the southern end of the Ocala National Forest is only about 50 miles or 80 kilometers due north of the Magic Kingdom, and it's there where Walt and his family spent vacations when he was a kid. Walt's mother Flora was from there, and on New Year's Day 1888 she married Elias Disney in Kismet, today a nearby abandoned settlement. Elias and Flora would briefly live in Akron, yet another nearby failed settlement, while attempting to run a citrus farm. Later they would move to Chicago, where both Walt and his older brother Roy were born, Roy in 1893 and Walt in 1901. In 1906, the family would move to another farm, this time in Marceline, Missouri, and then to Kansas City in 1911. While much has been written of Marceline's small-town influence on Walt in his teen years in Kansas City, where he learned animation, it's likely that trips to Paisley to visit with relatives gave him a feel of what Central Florida and its nature were all about. As an adult, Walt would return to the area regularly as well. His maternal grandparents Henrietta and Charles Call continued to live in the Paisley area. In fact, they're buried in the local Ponciana Cemetery, as can be seen here. Central Florida was Walt's choice for the Florida project for a number of reasons, one of them being personal. Amazing history fact number 2. The Magic Kingdom's famous tunnel system is actually on the first floor, with the park the guests see being the second floor. 50 years after Walt Disney World opened, most everyone knows there's a tunnel system underneath the Magic Kingdom. It's hardly a secret, and Disney even offers tours of it, but few people understand the scope of the tunnel system. As you can see from this early map, the tunnels are extensive. They're often called utilidors, short for utility corridors, because on top of providing access for the cast members, the Magic Kingdom tunnel system also contains electrical, HVAC, plumbing, and communication systems. Originally, significant portions of the property were swamp. The challenge for Disney was to make the land stable enough to support construction. Draining the site was out of question, since the procedure historically had proven disastrous to the delicate ecology. Rather than lower the water table, it was decided to raise the elevations of the construction areas, leaving the environmental quality of the site relatively undisturbed. The Magic Kingdom was built atop an elevated platform using stabilized landfill sturdy enough to support the construction. This is where the tunnel system entered the picture. Built on top of the stabilized surface, it was the first floor of the park. Comprised of 9 acres of tunnels, its form is different from the pathways upstairs. It's a larger circle with several spokes leading off in various directions. Instead of a central hub, there's a path down the middle. Once the tunnel was built, they had another problem. They have a massive tunnel complex sitting nearly 20 feet above the clay platform. Considering they needed to cover all of it before they could build the actual Magic Kingdom, they needed to come up with fill dirt, ASAP. Amazing history fact number 3. Disney created the Seven Seas Lagoon by dredging the land to use the soil to fill in around the utilidors. While the 450-acre or 1.8 square kilometer Bay Lake, located to the east of the Magic Kingdom, is a natural lake, its sister, the 200-acre or 0.8 square kilometer Seven Seas Lagoon, only exists because of the need to bury the tunnel. 8 million tons of earth were excavated from the area. That big hole was slowly transformed into Seven Seas Lagoon. It's connected to Bay Lake by the use of a water bridge. Instead of using a bridge to route the road that passes between the Ticket and Transportation Center and the Contemporary Resort, they built a bridge for the water. The Magic Kingdom was mostly ready to open by early autumn 1971. Both the Contemporary and Polynesian opened the same day as the Magic Kingdom, so the resort was arguably complete. Both hotels were important for appearance as much as for places to house guests. To this day, they are the 2 most famous hotels in Disney World, and are as much a part of the Vacation Kingdom's image as is the Magic Kingdom itself. That, however, isn't how they began. Amazing history fact number 4. The Contemporary Resort and Polynesian Village weren't owned or even built by Disney. The 2 resorts were developed by the United States Steel Corporation, and initially the Contemporary was supposed to be called the Tempo Bay Hotel. Contemporary was to be only the working title. It and the Polynesian were designed by architect Welton Beckett of Los Angeles. Beckett and his company had been designing major projects since the 30s, including the Capitol Records Building in Los Angeles and the Grand Ole Opry House in Nashville. To construct the buildings, steel frames were erected and modular pre-constructed rooms, designed by California architect Donald Wexler, were lifted into place by crane. The rooms were built off-site, and the whole process was designed to show that it could lead to lower construction costs. Built conventionally, each room would have weighed 30 tons, but the modular process brought the weight down to 1/5 that weight. This would reduce materials and save money. Disney's agreement with U.S. Steel was that they would retain the land, and U.S. Steel would build and own the hotels. Disney would then lease and run them. During the multi-year construction process, the Disney-U.S. Steel relationship grew increasingly strained. There were problems with the construction, especially with meeting deadlines. It slowly became a constant worry of Roy Disney. Much like his brother Walt, he wasn't used to having such a large production out of his control, and a few weeks before Roy's death, he was able to negotiate a deal with U.S. Steel to not only buy their interest in the hotel, but also assume all remaining construction costs. Once Disney took over the projects, they put every resource on them, and while the resorts weren't exactly completed by opening day, they had guests in many of the rooms. Amazing history fact number 5. The former Discovery Island in Bay Lake was first called Blackbeard Island by Disney. Today, most Disney World guests will know that Discovery Island is the hub area in Disney's Animal Kingdom. But longtime fans will know that the original Discovery Island was a small zoo in Bay Lake near Fort Wilderness. But on October 1st, 1971, that island wasn't developed. Disney initially named it Blackbeard Island, as can be seen on this early map. While there's not a lot of information about it, it was going to be a pirate-themed attraction. That concept didn't last very long. and it was renamed Treasure Island when it opened as a small zoo in 1974. It was only after the zoo gained accreditation that it became Discovery Island. Now let's turn our attention back to the Magic Kingdom. I'll cover which attractions were open on October 1st and those that opened soon after. Upon entering the park, we start on Main Street, USA. On opening day, it was served by 3 forms of transportation. Of course, transportation is one key to understanding the entire Disney World experience, as we'll see. Above the entrance to Main Street sits the Walt Disney World Railroad. This is one of the most famous railroads in the world and has been running under steam power since the park opened. Amazing history fact number 6. The Walt Disney World Railroad engines were found in Mexico. On Disney's narrow gauge tracks run trains pulled by 4 Baldwin Locomotive Works engines that were built between 1916 and 1928. They were purchased in Mexico in 1969 and restored to appear as if they were built in the 1880s. There was also an engine from the Pittsburgh Locomotive and Car Works purchased at the same time, but it had too much damage and wasn't restored. The cost of the 5 locomotives were $32,750, or an estimated $240,000 in 2021. This newest railroad, pulled by some of the oldest engines, only had one stop. It wouldn't be until May 1st, 1972 that the Frontierland station was opened. Today most people know the train makes 3 stops, but that didn't happen until 1988 when Disney World opened Mickey's Birthday Land. While the railroad took people away from Main Street, the 2 other transportation types moved people from one end of the land to the other. One was the narrow-gauge horse-drawn streetcars, and the other was a collection of early gasoline-powered automobiles and trucks, including a double-decker bus, a fire engine, and an early car. Both the horse-drawn and horseless vehicles followed the same route, and they were very popular, partly because of the novelty, but also because the only other use for an A ticket was the carousel in Fantasyland. The vehicles travel along Main Street, past shops and eateries, and only one other attraction that was operating on opening day. That attraction showcased one of the novel forms of entertainment around the turn of the 20th century, moving pictures. Constantly running early Mickey Mouse shorts, the Main Street Cinema was a place guests liked to visit, especially since it had air conditioning, one luxury that wasn't available in early movie theaters. And while Main Street would never be a land filled with attractions, 2 more would open by mid-1973. The Plaza Swan boats opened in May. They took up to 14 guests on a circular trip around the canal in the hub or plaza area. Starting at a dock near the entrance to Tomorrowland, they would pass the castle and the Crystal Palace while going under 7 bridges. The pilots would talk about the park and about Walt Disney. The second attraction also covered both topics. It was the Walt Disney Story. Located in a town square, it opened in April. With film and interesting displays, the life story of Walt Disney and his company was told to guests. Turning left as we enter the hub, we cross into Adventureland, and one of the first things we see is the Swiss Family Robinson Treehouse. One of the 3 opening day attractions in the land, it stands 60 feet or 18 meters tall and 90 feet or 27 meters wide. While the treehouse was the second built in a Disney theme park, it was the 3rd one built, as the original was constructed in a living tree on the island of Tobago for the movie. The Magic Kingdom version is a 200-ton steel and stucco structure with immense concrete roots that run 42 feet into the ground. There are 600 branches and 800,000 vinyl flowers and leaves. The treehouse was never meant to live in, but it has an operating water system that provides fresh water from the stream located below the tree. The second attraction was the Jungle Cruise, which takes up more land than any other attraction in the park, though the Grand Prix Raceway comes close. The Jungle Cruise was one of the largest projects to be built in the park. Like all the other waterways, the cruise's rivers were essentially massive concrete pools. Remember, the water could hardly seep through the soil and flood the tunnels. Plus, there was the large temple structure guests would float into, and Stanley Falls, where guests got to witness the backside of water. The third attraction was the home of 225 singing birds, crooning flowers, and chanting Polynesian tiki gods, known as the Tropical Serenade of the Enchanted Tiki Birds. While the animatronics utilized in the show are rather simple, there are so many of them that it's easily one of the most complicated attractions in the park. Disney would add one more attraction to Adventureland in its first 2 years of operation. This too would be a highly complicated ride, the Pirates of the Caribbean. Opened in December 1973, just in time for the resort's third Christmas season, it was a celebration of those oh-so-kid-friendly topics of theft, torture, debauchery, and murder. 47 years later, it's continued to be one of the most popular Disney attractions, clearly proving that everything is better in a boat. From Adventureland, we next head to Frontierland, the only one of the park's original lands not to be directly connected to the hub. Opening day guests would enter through Adventureland or Liberty Square. Those guests would have 4 attractions to visit. The star attraction was obviously the Country Bear Jamboree. Interestingly, this show, performed by animatronic bears, received its premiere in the Magic Kingdom and would then be opened 5 months later in Disneyland. It would be the only opening day attraction that did so. The other show in Frontierland was performed not by animatronics, but by real live humans. Known as the Diamond Horseshoe Revue, it was the embodiment of Hollywood's vision of the Wild West Saloon show. From opening day, it was the only attraction that required reservations. To cover the next attraction on Frontierland's opening day list, we need to reveal amazing history fact number 7. The Frontierland Shooting Arcade originally used live ammunition. One of the most traditional carnival attractions in the park, the Shootin Arcade was, and is, just that. Basic animated things you shoot. While today it's all done with light beams, it might be hard to believe that originally it was guns that fired lead shot. Of course it was perfectly safe. In fact, the main reason Disney abandoned the live ammunition was the cost of repainting the targets nearly every night. The fourth attraction on opening day was Davy Crockett's Explorer Canoes, which took 18 guests on a tour of the rivers of America. The 35-foot or 11-meter long canoes operated with one cast member fore and one aft, and 10 additional rows for guests, the middle 8 being wide enough for 2 people. Much like the Shooting Arcade, today the concept of guests rolling themselves around 2 islands for about a 20-minute trip might be a bit surprising, but it was a popular attraction for a number of years. Tom Sawyer Island was the only additional attraction to open in the park's first 2 years. It opened in May '73, along with the rafts that took guests back and forth to the island, the same day as the Plaza Swan boats. Tom Sawyer Island is a playground comprised of 2 islands. On the larger island sits Fort Langhorne, named for the author of Tom Sawyer, Samuel Langhorne Clemens. The next land to enter is what an old friend liked to call Revolution Land, but it's better known as Liberty Square. This small area also had 4 attractions open on October 1st. In fact, it's the only land in the Magic Kingdom that would lose an opening day attraction, and as of 2021 hasn't added any more. Those 4 attractions include a riverboat, which travels the rivers of America. The large ship sits on a track like the Jungle Cruise boats, so there's no risk of grounding on a sandbar. The original riverboat was the Admiral Joe Fowler, named after one of the most important builders of both Disneyland and Walt Disney World. In 1980, the riverboat Fowler was accidentally dropped from a crane while it was being transferred to a dry dock for routine overhaul. Its hull was damaged beyond repair. It was replaced by a similar riverboat, the Liberty Belle. Then there was yet another boat ride. How many does that make so far? 7. This time it's the Mike Fink keel boats, the third way guests could circumnavigate Tom Sawyer Island. Like the Davy Crockett canoes, the keel boats were free-floating, and they puttered around the artificial river more quickly than the other rides. They were double-decker boats that could hold about 30 passengers, and they took off from a dock near the entrance to attraction number 3, the Haunted Mansion. In a theme park with more than a dozen world-famous attractions, the Haunted Mansion might be the most famous. This dark ride uses doom buggies to transport guests around a mansion with 999 ghosts. Possibly more has been written about this attraction than all others combined. The Hall of Presidents is the other major attraction in Liberty Square. It features each of the presidents of the U.S. on a stage in a presentation on bits of American history. It's the only attraction in the park that's officially updated every 4 or 8 years when a new president enters office. As of 2021, the hall has 9 more presidents than it did on opening day. Now, while it's not technically an attraction, there is one other site in Liberty Square that deserves to be. Amazing history fact number 8. While the Swiss Family Robinson tree is fake, the Liberty tree is real and is one of the largest trees ever transplanted. The original Boston Liberty tree was an elm, but in Florida it's live oaks that dominate the land. While Disney horticulturalists were exploring the property to look for plants they could transplant to the Magic Kingdom and the hotels, they came across one they thought would be perfect for the Liberty tree. Growing some 6 miles or 9.7 kilometers from its present location, the Liberty tree was 60 feet or 18 meters tall and weighed over 35 tons when it was first noticed in the late 1960s. The Liberty tree was too large to safely transplant using conventional means, but that didn't stop Morgan Evans, Disney's head of landscape design. Better known as Bill Evans, he was the primary landscape architect for Disneyland and Disney World, as well as its parks in Paris, Tokyo, and Hong Kong. As Bill Evans has said, "We went around with pruning shears and reduced the root systems to something we could handle. Now we were afraid we would crush the sensitive cambium, which is the film that is the lifeblood of any tree, which lies just under the bark. So rather than seizing it around the throat, so to speak, we bored a couple of holes through the trunk, one north-south and one east-west, and put some 1.5-inch steel through the trunk, and thus provided a convenient handle. We then picked the tree up by these steel pins and transported it." It was hardly as simple as Evans described. The oak was estimated to be 130 years old when it was moved by a 100-ton crane. That would make it 180 years old as of 2021, though that's still fairly young for a live oak, considering they can live for well over 500 years. From Liberty Square, we can move into Fantasyland. With 8 attractions operating on day 1, the land contained fully 1/3 of the park's attractions. There was Cinderella's Golden Carousel, which was originally built for the Detroit Palace Garden Park in 1917. It's a Small World, the boat ride that premiered as one of the several Disney-designed attractions at the 1964 New York World's Fair. The Skyway, a gondola ride system that took guests to and from Tomorrowland. Dumbo the Flying Elephant, a spinning ride which elevates the riders into the air. Snow White's Scary Adventures, a dark ride that was sometimes considered the scariest ride in the park. Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, another dark ride which put guests in the position of Mr. Toad, recklessly driving his car through the English countryside. The Mad Tea Party, the classic spinning teacup ride which originally didn't have doors on the cups. And the Mickey Mouse Revue. Amazing history fact number 9. The Mickey Mouse Revue was the first opening day attraction to close in the Magic Kingdom, but the show didn't end there. The Mickey Mouse Revue was an animatronic stage show with the premise being a musical concert in which Mickey Mouse conducted an orchestra made up of a long list of Disney characters. While it was one of the only attractions that opened in the park that was unique to the Magic Kingdom, it would operate just until 1980, a run of less than 9 years. While it was a successful attraction, the Disney company decided it would be better if it was moved to Tokyo Disneyland for that park's opening in 1983. Remarkably, 2 more attractions opened in the ride-heavy land very soon after opening. Peter Pan's Flight, yet another dark ride, this one where guests are suspended in the air in tiny pirate ships. It opened just 2 days after opening day, while 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea opened 2 weeks later. 20,000 Leagues was similar to the submarine voyage in Disneyland, but it was rethemed as Captain Nemo's nuclear-powered Nautilus submarine. And if you're still keeping count, that's 9 boat attractions. A mini amazing history fact. While the carousel was being installed, Roy Disney noticed that the placement was off-center with the Cinderella Castle breezeway, so he asked that it be moved 8 inches to be properly centered. To get to Tomorrowland, we could simply walk from Fantasyland, but I think on opening day it'd have been interesting to ride the Skyway from one land to the other, which would help us understand amazing history fact number 10. On opening day, Tomorrowland was nearly empty of attractions. The Skyway was one of just 2 attractions finished and operating, so if you were there and rode it to get to Tomorrowland, you'd have only the Grand Prix Raceway, a race car track designed to give kids an opportunity to drive on a semi-open track. The good news is that while those were the only attractions open on October 1st, 2 more opened by the end of '71 and a 3rd opened in 1972. Circle Vision 360 opened with the movie America the Beautiful, which played to 1974 and returned to run from 1975 to '79. As the name suggests, Circle Vision used separate movies running in sync to provide a full 360-degree viewing experience. The same technology would be used at Epcot in the China and Canada pavilions. Flight to the Moon opened on Christmas Eve. It was an attraction that simulated a space launch. It was the first of the Magic Kingdom attractions to get a significant change when it reopened in 1975 as Mission to Mars. The attraction was rethemed an additional 2 times, while keeping the structure of the ride essentially the same. The final attraction was If You Had Wings in June '72, giving Tomorrowland 5 attractions, 8 months after the park opened. If You Had Wings used the Omnimover car similar to the Haunted Mansion and took guests on a trip designed to get them interested in Eastern Airlines destinations. It was the one attraction that was heavily focused on a sponsor. Several other attractions were sponsored by corporations. For instance, Goodyear sponsored the Grand Prix, but it wasn't designed to encourage guests to go out and buy tires. So that's a tour of Walt Disney World 50 years ago. The resort not only was the biggest single event in Florida's tourism history, it was one of the most important events in the state's entire history. And that's why old-timers in Florida might still refer to the eras, before Disney and after Disney. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like the video and subscribe to my channel to learn more about Florida's tourism history. Stingray Tom's Florida, traveling through time around the Sunshine State.